Got it. This reminds me of that movie, whatever it was, where can you turn this mic off, or should I just get away from it? Is that better if I just get away from it? Can you hear me okay? Yes?
Yeah.
Cool. That movie where, anybody see it? I can't remember, Naked Gun or whatever, where Leslie Nielsen wore the mic into the men's room. It was a great scene if you missed it. Well, I am Bob, and I am an adult child. Come in recovery, some that. Well, I guess I'll tell you. I was really planned on dressing better for this tonight. I actually had some nice slacks, but I live in the San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles, and my slacks are in Oceanside, so it didn't work out for me. We'll see if you can identify with this thinking. I wake up yesterday morning. I had originally been going to drive over here with a dear friend of mine. We both occasionally smoke cigars, so we thought we'd rent a Lincoln Town car and just cruise over and smoke, Cuban Monte Cristo A's on the way over and enjoy ourselves. And it turned he had to go to court, he couldn't come, and then I made plane reservations, then he thought he could come, and then he found out he couldn't come, and by that time it was last night, and I'm thinking, well, because I'm a periodic when it comes to working out, and I'm just coming off the end of a non-working out phase here. So finding pants that fit can be difficult. And I realized the only slacks I had that really fit were the ones that I had left down in Oceanside, thinking I was going to go down there and that we were going to leave from there. So I'm thinking this morning, I think, well, do I buy slacks, new slacks? I don't need new slacks. I got slacks. And then I thought, well, maybe I could just, fly out of San Diego instead of Burbank, drive to Oceanside, get the pants, drive on to San Diego, get the plane, come here, And then I just smiled and laughed at myself and reminded myself that growth is sort of like a roller coaster ride for me. I have long periods up at the top, smooth, smoking along, and then they're just complete, right down into the bottom. I am an adult child. What is an adult child? Well, basically, an adult child is anyone who grows up in a home where there's tension. The worst environment for a child is one that's tense. It doesn't have to be an alcoholic parent. It can be mental illness. It doesn't have to be any drinking parent. You can have your grandfather or grandmother on either side that was alcoholic. Your parents grew up with it. And therefore, in their need to not recreate the home that they grew up in, they create more tension in other directions. So basically, that's what it's about. What we do know today about children who are raised in any kind of a dysfunctional system, the common denominator in the children is tension. What is this? I'll tell you about mine. I don't have overheads because all my friends who are lecturers tell me that I'm so right-brained that it would just be, I'd make an audience nuts because I'd put a paper in, slide in, put it on the wall, and then I'd think of something and go this way, and you would all be waiting for me to get back to this, and I might never, and the thing would be over and I would be done. My dad was the alcoholic. He was a pretty quiet one for the most part. He just went to work every day and came home every night, ate dinner, got drunk, went to bed. When he started drinking in bars, my pride for him went up. I'd seen him back down from a guy on a street corner in front of a mailbox. The guy pulled up real close to put his mail in, and my dad said something to him, and the guy got out. He was a big guy. And my dad backed off, and I was very ashamed of my father. I don't know how old I was, not very old. 5, maybe 6, I don't know. And then he started getting in a couple of fights, I think. That was it, my whole lifetime, in bars down near the car barn from where we lived. And I was beginning to get proud of him now. This is a little boy. Interesting what you find pride in, right? But at least he duked it out with somebody, and that seemed right to me, because that was basically pointing the direction that I was going to go for a long time in my life. My mother was a world-class child batterer. She broke my nose. She tore out the corners of my eyes. She broke my ribs. She did a job beyond a job. She'd be in prison today if she did to me today what she did to me then, beyond a doubt. But in those days, children were basically your chattel. No one interfered. What you did in your house with your children was your business, and the neighbors stayed out of it. At least now, thank God, some people will get involved and will call to get help for the children. This created a lot of problems for me. Number one, my childhood is lost to me because when you grow up in a home with that kind of tension, particularly when you're going to be physically hurt, my whole childhood is spent watching the adults, checking their mood, looking for their facial expressions, trying to figure out what can I do, believing that I have power that I don't have. What can I do to make them okay so I don't get hurt? That's not a kid's life. I'm supposed to be out playing with the other guys in the street in the mud, or baseball, or throwing balls, or something. But I'm not supposed to be so involved in my own survival that I don't even think like a kid by the time I'm 4. I'm already an adult. I'm already figuring out how to survive. I'm busy. And I've stayed that way ever since. Busy mommy. Thinking all the time. Seeing Mark was fun. He's got a set of tapes over there called the vulture on the headboard. That's how I've always described my mind. You know, I wake up in the morning, it's like there's this large vulture sitting there on my headboard, which is my mind. And it's always just, hi. Good morning. I've been waiting for you to wake up. I want to talk to you about a couple of things. You didn't get enough sleep. You probably should get some more. I may have had 12 hours. That doesn't matter. That has no relevance to what the voice says at all. Well, you can't get more sleep because if you don't get more sleep, you won't get into work on time. If you don't get into work on time, you're going to get fired. And as you're really irresponsible with money, you don't have enough money to hold you for a very long period of time. Therefore, you're going to be in the streets in about 6 weeks. And oh yeah, that little bump below your knee, it's not a bruise, it's bone cancer. So would it surprise anyone if I told you I'm not a morning person? You know, I need a few minutes in the morning to pull it together because basically within the first 6.5 seconds of my morning, I'm unemployed in the streets dying of cancer. So I got to kind of pull back from that sort of onslaught to get going. So I hit school at age 5. Well, it was a nightmare. I'm highly intelligent. I have a very high IQ. I have a severe attention deficit disorder. And I'm living in a home where I'm just being beaten to a pulp. I missed so much school my first year, they would not give me any grades. And before I began to do this work on the consequences of growing up in that kind of family, what those consequences are on my adult life today, I found that report card once at my mother's house. It said, you know, couldn't give a grade. And I said, how come? She said, I don't know. He was sick or something. Blew it off. You know? And I didn't know because it was not a conscious memory yet. School was very difficult for me. In those days when you had a high IQ and you were slow, it was perceived that your slowness was what's the word I'm looking for? Intentional. As opposed to being just a matter that you were slow. So if you have a high IQ and you're slow, then you're a bad guy. Because you're just doing this to upset the teacher, upset the class, upset everything else. And what they didn't understand is I could not, at that point, put stuff together. It was to change when I was to hit the street and deal drugs. Now my life depends on putting things together. And then that began to work better in the sense of native intelligence. I remember one time Mrs. Cooney. Now, I haven't seen Mrs. Cooney in a long time. She was my second grade teacher. So how long has it been? 55 years since I've seen Mrs. Cooney? Dear Mrs. Cooney? I can remember her today like she was standing right there. Overweight, solid, built like a tree trunk, corrective shoes, didn't like children. And she was a second grade teacher. Teachers are a lot better looking nowadays. And they were then. I don't know where the hell they were getting them then, but anyway. So Mrs. Cooney would write a problem on the board like 2 + 2, draw a line under it, and spin and look at me and say, Bobby, what's the answer? Well, if you were just a kid playing ball in the street, having a pretty good time, things are fairly okay at home, you'd say 4. But I look at it and I have a lot of things I have to figure out before I can answer her. First thing I need to know is, why does she want to know? Okay? Remember, I'm coming from an abusive environment, and you can get hurt very bad for answering questions that are a setup. My mother's so mad she wants to punch me, so she'll ask me a question that's a no-win question, and I'm going to get hit, no matter what the answer. So I want to know why this big babe with the black shoes wants to know what this is. Then I got to figure out, coming from my childhood, basically, most of us will judge the outside world based on our feelings and our input in our childhood. I want to know, does she know? I'm being asked questions at home by parents who do not know the answer to the question that they are asking, and when I give them the correct answer, I still get hit. So this is not a winning. So far, there's no win here for me yet. Once I have finally worked out that it's part of Mrs. Cooney's job description to elicit from me some form of proof that I'm, in fact, retaining the information she's dispensing, I decide, okay, I can tell her. Well, Susie was also in my 2nd grade class. Susie's father was an alcoholic. He was the kind of alcoholic where the Christmas lights were still in the house in July, at which point you leave them now because it's so close to Christmas. There's no sense taking them down now. And I understand that logic perfectly. Yeah, well, shit, Christmas is only, 5 months away. But what the hell? Susie is going to shore up the viability of her family by getting straight A's for the rest of her life. If I was to find Susie today, she probably has more credentials than she can use. She probably was at the top of her class every time, or she killed herself. And the sad thing about that is a concept that is validated by the society in which we live. You're not who you are what you do, or you are what you own. This is a tough one for adult children. This is a killer for adult children. So Susie, by getting straight A's, her parents could hold up her report card and say, see, look, there's nothing wrong with us. If there was anything wrong with us, she wouldn't be getting straight A's. So being in that place, under that kind of pressure, Susie can only wait so long for an answer, and then her system explodes. So she just throws up her hand and says, 4. Okay. She did it. Now. So I have been embarrassed and humiliated in the class. I'm going to get one more note about being a problem child that I could have answered the question, but I didn't. All recess I spent trying to figure out how to take Susie's life. Because Susie has done the one unacceptable thing in my world. Susie has drawn public attention to the fact that I am not okay. And all of my energy and all of my time is spent on making you believe I'm okay, even though inside I feel anything but. I am 7 years old. I'm uncomfortable in my body. I feel inadequate, insufficient. I feel inferior. I feel like I have this little pot. Cauldron would be a better example. Down here somewhere inside of me. And it's like a little cauldron of bubbling sewage. And the one thing I must do without fail is to make sure that you never, ever see that little bubbling cauldron. Well, today the bubbling cauldron has a name. It's called shame. I am ashamed of who I believe myself to be. That's almost like a terminal illness if you have it already as a child. And the reason I say it's almost a terminal illness is because all of the solutions to it we are given are external. basically. Societal solutions to shame are external. So you're trying to heal a deep, deep internal wound with external activities or actions. If you use the right hair color, if you use the right shampoo, if you use the right douche, if you use the right, aftershave, if you use the right whatever, if you shop in the right stores, if you wear the right clothes, if you work in the right place, if you live in the right area, if you drive the right car. These things are supposed to fix this. And any of you who have ever tried it, like me, you know it doesn't. Because so much of this is emotional, and the guys may, I don't know how in touch with it you are or not. Let's take cars. This is a guy thing, right? Cars? We like cars. There's absolutely no reason in the world to put numbers and letters on the back of an automobile. None. It's a car. It's a Mercedes. Okay. So is it a 400 or 420 or 320 or 560 or, what the hell is it? That's designed for a very specific reason, and don't think they don't know it. When I am cruising down the highway in my BMW 576 XXX, and I see in front of me a guy in his BMW 550 XX, I slowly get up behind him, drop on it, pull out, past him, slow down once I get over, in time for him to read the numbers on the back of my car so that he knows who is the superior human being in this little encounter. And then, feeling superior, I now drive on the road further until I'm smoked by some sucker in a 7 XXX triple I with gold wheels that leaves me, standing in the dust. That's it, man. That's all the numbers and letters are about. A lot of people will pay thousands more to get the bigger numbers. Why don't you just buy the numbers? For Christ's sake, buy the 400 and put the 560 number on, I have a good friend that has a considerable amount of money. He buys pretty much what he wants, and usually they're expensive cars. His current is a big Mercedes coupe. Has no numbers on the back. He always takes the numbers off. All of his cars. I've been with him in situations at stoplights when people have driven up next to him and indicated for him to roll his window down, and he has, and they say, "What is that?" They'll say, "It's a Mercedes." Yeah, but what model? Cliff will just smile and put his window back up. And they're angry. Do you know why they're angry? They don't know who they are. They don't know who they are. Are they superior or inferior to this guy? It's a guy thing, for the most part. We are taught to fix the shame we feel by out there. And it cannot be done. How many of you bought a new car you really wanted? And it fixed it for what? 3 months tops. And then you're sitting in the new car feeling just like you felt in the old car. It didn't do it. I have friends who have achieved immense fortunes. They didn't do it. It didn't fix it. And we're talking millions and millions of dollars. And it didn't fix it. Second largest landlord in the state of California. Didn't fix it. Lives in fear. Can't even, shops at Kmart for his kids and his wife. He used to drive Gremlins. I don't know what he's driving now. Got everything he wanted and then lived in terror that somebody would take it away from him or kidnap one of his children. That's what happens when we try and fix internal things with external stuff. Well, there's a reason why it works. I mean, it's why it's so successful, why we try and do that. At least for me, it's much easier for me to go to Armani and buy a suit than it is to go down here and deal with the pain. I don't want to know about this pain. I know down there is the worst pain I have ever felt in my entire life. I know that intuitively, and I'm not going. Not on your life. And it almost cost me my life before I became willing to go. That's the power that what transpires when many of us are children can have on our adult life. Relationships. If you have problems in your relationship, look back and do an inventory on mom and dad. The original dynamic duo. You know, my father was drunk, my mother beat the living hell out of me, and they almost never talked to each other. That was it. I was 18 years old, 19 years old, sitting in a bar in Denver, Colorado with a guy having a drink, and I looked at him suddenly and I said, hey, you know what? Now I know why my father drank. If I was married to my mother, I would have drank too. I understood it. I was also a bludgeoning alcoholic drug addict too, but, you know. Performance. Athletes. This is what's now fast becoming one for women, but for guys. You know? You can shore up the self-esteem of your family by being successful in athletics. How many of you have been to a little league game or a soccer game or something and watched the dads that you thought were trying to coach professionally? And there's a 7-year-old there thinking, I want to go home and play Nintendo. You know? That's all he cares about. He wants to go home and play Nintendo. But if he is a star, you know, Pop Warner, whatever it is, then Dad can stand tall. Dad, who, by the way, never played football in his entire life, okay? So you can look back at your family and get a sense that it was okay. I sort of feel sorry for the people that are suffering from their history, and it looks okay by the standards of this society. Now, if you get that the standards of this society are somewhat off, then maybe you can look at your family in a new light. It's like we have, just countless eating disorders in this country today. Well, one of the things that began many, many years ago was the family, the healthy family, the well family, the successful family was going to have discussions over what was troubling everybody in the house. Where? The dinner table. At the dinner table. And then we wonder why we have so many people with eating disorders. We're going to talk about your failings as a child at the dinner table and straighten it out. Can you imagine how painful that is to have your shortcomings pointed up to you? And what will stop that? Food. You know, go for it. Sugar, grease, and salt are my 3 big ones. And I can even still delude myself today. And I was macrobiotic for 2 years. Do you know how to turn this one? I think this one, what's causing me a problem up here? Or am I the only one hearing it? Yeah, that's cool. That works. Roll the sucker out anyway. I love talking to an audience with codependent people in it. You get so much help. Sometimes more than you want. But thank you, whoever made that suggestion. Need fix things. That's a big part of it. That's a big part of it. Make everything okay, keep peace at all costs, make everybody happy. I had a dear friend after about 3 or 4 years of intensive therapy and a couple of years of AA. She went back to her family in the East, big family, wealthy family. Everybody shows up to Thanksgiving, like, 38 people at the dining table and, 20 kids in the other dining room at another dining room table. And she's sitting there with some consciousness now and some awareness. And she always wondered why she wanted to kill herself after Thanksgiving, Everybody looked okay. Everybody was successful. And she's about halfway through this Thanksgiving dinner, looks at the ceiling in the dining room and just screams as the daughter goes, "Ah!" And then just looks around and, goes back and finishes her meal. In the kitchen afterwards, her mother came up to her and said, "How could you embarrass me so?" Guess what? We learn to be responsible for the behavior of people we're not responsible for. How many times have you seen couples out dating and one has corrected the other because they believe that that person is a reflection on them? Nah. I don't care if the girl I'm dating has 14 tattoos and, red pointed hair and you think she's weird. It's not a reflection on me. It's her. It's her. Guess where we learn that? Take responsibility. That you have a lot of power. You're killing your mother. Wow, that's a lot of power. I'm killing Mom. Oh, see, the thing is, it's subtle stuff. It's not big stuff. When you hear about ACA and you hear about CODA and you hear about these things, it's real easy to get the impression that it's big stuff. That Dad tied you to the bumper of the car and drug you around the block naked in front of the neighbors. It may just be that when you go home with your 4.0, Dad said, "Did you see how little Susie down the street? Do you know that she got a 4.4? That's simple. And it's like a spear. It's like a spear. Because Dad is so into his own stuff that he doesn't get it. He's talking to a child who's looking for approval. And he automatically gives disapproval. Why? Because he probably didn't get any when he was a kid. There's a real, there's a saying around here all the time, particularly in 12-step recovery, particularly in Alcoholics Anonymous, which is, your parents did the best they did. They did the best they could. Why are you bothering with that stuff? It was a long time ago. Well, then why am I making amends for the, guy whose kneecap I blew off in the goddamn drug deal 20 years ago if it doesn't matter? I don't have to talk to him either, So that's not important. This obviously can't be important because he's still limping around, and they're dead. See, I go right in and I just forget where it all was. Oh, well, I'll go on to something else. There are a lot of people that I know who are, I know, Mom and Dad did the best job they could. That's absolutely true. If you asked me about my parents today, I would tell you that. I would tell you that my mother and my father did the very best job they could do. Now, but that's not the end of the statement. The job my mother and father did was criminally punishable in a court of law. Criminally punishable in a court of law. Number two, because they did the best they could doesn't mean it's okay as far as I'm concerned. It's not a complete whitewash. Oh, they did the best they could, so something's wrong with me. No, wrong. They basically are. This is a good story, little story. It's worth telling. I knew this girl in the program. She was coming up on her first AA birthday in Alcoholics Anonymous. Her mother had 4 years. Her mother was, she was tough, man. She was an old biker chick and a, major heroin addict, and I mean, just, She was tough. I liked her a lot. But she was hard. So on this girl's 4th AA birthday, her mother calls her. And she says to her, look, I am responsible for the fact that you don't know how to have a relationship. I am responsible for the fact that you can't keep a job. I am responsible for the fact that you're a pretty rotten mother to your 2 children. I'm responsible for the fact that you don't know how to handle money and that you are a compulsive shopper. And she listed about 6 other things. And she said, now understand, this is my first AA birthday present to you. I am responsible for how you are, but you are responsible for the solutions. And I thought, that's cool. I can accept that. It's not my fault. I'm the way I am. I get so sick of that one, particularly on the news, that I could scream. Well, we had another kid in the neighborhood who was treated just like George here, and my God, he's CEO of Standard Oil. Why did George murder 14 people? I don't think you can compare like that. It doesn't seem to be logical to me, and I'm not sure it would be allowed in a class of study. Or if it would, I'd want to move to a different school of learning. We come out how we come out based on the information we got when we were children. I behave like I behave as an adult based on what I learned as a child. Uncomfortable stuff, let me tell you. You know what it means? It means no matter how bad you want it, your adult life is out of control. It means you're not living the life you wanted to live or had planned on living. You're not having the joy you wanted to have. You're not having the happiness you wanted to have. Many things are struggles. Work can be a struggle. Relationship can be a struggle. Friendships can be a struggle. Handling money can be a struggle. It can just be hard. Days can just be hard and harder and harder. And you're completely out of control. This is not the life you wanted or planned on. But it's the one you got. The first freeing thing for me was I wasn't responsible for being in this place right here, right now. But once I had that piece of information, now I've got to go to work to change it. We'll do a lot of that stuff in the workshop tomorrow, how to do some of this stuff and change it, what some of that is. I am currently a father of a 10-year-old daughter. Divorced and separated from her, which breaks my heart. Absolutely. When Tina and I planned on a child, we wanted a child. It was like, and both of us had been sober for a long time at the time. She'd been, I don't know how many years, 17 maybe, and I was like maybe 27 years sober. 26. Neither one of us had children in sobriety. Neither one of us. It just hadn't been on the agenda for either one of us. And all we could think about, she and I, was a kid. And we were out one day shopping in Santa Fe where we lived, and she looked at me, we were in this little shop, and she said, I think today's the day. I said, fine, great, let's go. We threw away the shopping list and went home with the full intention of making a baby. Beautiful time it was. That was probably the single most beautiful time I've ever spent in bed with a woman in my life, knowing that the sole purpose of this encounter was the hopes that we would be the human process, part of making a child. Sure as heck, she was pregnant. And we were thrilled. Just thrilled. And then we were sitting there one night, playing music for her. The gynecologist had said, the OBGYN had said, this child's hearing nothing but classical music, till she's born. It keeps them quieter, I guess, and more at peace. So we played classical music for her. We're sitting there one night, Tina pregnant, we're playing classical music. And I don't know who brought up the conversation, but we realized that neither one of us were equipped to be parents. This is a little late for the discovery, but not too late. Man, we headed for the bookstore and bought everything we could find. Because neither one of us, both her parents were raging alcoholics. My ex-wife is very fluent in foreign languages because her father was a very famous film editor, and he used to always take the family with him when he'd be cutting films in foreign countries. And both her mother and her father used to get so drunk she'd have to bail them out of jail. So she, as a child, 12 years old, learned all these languages in all these countries so she could get her parents out of jail. Some things have an upside. I feel like Clinton drinking the Diet Coke here. We began to read and talk and read and talk and read. And we discovered that none of the information given to either one of us as children was valuable as parents. That if anything, what we believed to be correct in many instances in the process of raising a child was incorrect. So we decided to start talking about this and working on this and finding ways that we would have to change. As a battered child, I was going to have to learn to control my temper so I wouldn't go off. We decided we did not want this child screamed at. We'd have to find a way to avoid that terrible yelling, loud noise which scares the hell out of them. Only two things they're afraid of newborn is noise and falling, the fear of falling. Anything else is taught after that. Simple. So we talked about this stuff and we worked on this stuff and we said, I got to count 10 anytime I'm mad before I say anything to this child. And I'm up for that. And Tina had to learn how not to scream. And, we just worked and read. And we got Penelope Leach's book, Birth to Age 5, and book on how to listen to your children. She can't name here yet, but we want to know how to listen to her. We just went nuts, of course. We're both compulsive and obsessive and right off the edge. Now, if you want a definition for compulsive and obsessive, basically it's you can take something that's good for you and almost kill yourself with it. That would be my definition. I remember when I quit smoking, I was hanging out with some guys who were runners. And they said, come on, man, you got to start running with us. It'll make the withdrawal from the cigarettes and staying off of them after a lot easier. I said, oh, okay, cool. So I started running with them. Well, I'm compulsive and obsessive. We're running like 3 miles a day, and I started thinking, if I feel this good at the end of 3, what's 4? And then what's 5? And then what's 6? What's 7? So then, I'm running 5-6 days a week, 12 miles a day, and now I'm starting on marathons, and now I have no knees left. I ride bicycles. For what? I can't run. Something I loved more than anything. I loved running. It was so cool just to get out there alone and run. And when I went to conferences to speak and stuff, I could just put on my running shorts and my tennis shoes and blow out of the hotel and go tour the city. Easy. It was very cool. But can't do it when you're compulsive and obsessive, and it just is too good. It's like, oh, boy. Alexander is born. I should tell you all that. Living in Santa Fe, there, of course, were many, many methods of childbirth being practiced, including horse water troughs, babies being born under water. There's about everything going on there. In 12-step recovery, there's everything going on there. I had a guy who interviewed his past lives, inventoried his past lives. And people were upset, and I thought, who the hell cares? If he wants to, inventory his past lives. That's kind of interesting, actually. I'm sure a lot of people would have been horrified by it, but I found it interesting, particularly when he was wrapping the bodies in the Egyptian, Anyway. So Tina says to her doctor, she has these 3 wonderful Hispanic women OBGYNs. They were just wonderful. It's been a long time since I met physicians with the humanity and the earthiness of these 3 women. They delivered, babies in ditches and small farms, and, they were, well, you can imagine what they were. And so, before delivery, let's put a little God into this. Alexandra was a big baby, so she was 2 weeks late, and by the time they decided to induce labor, the nurses were on strike at St. Vincent's Hospital in Santa Fe. So she had to go to Los Alamos, which is the last place on earth I wanted my daughter born, right? I mean, please, God, not the home of the atomic bomb. I mean, anything, you know. A reservation, I don't care what, but not Los Alamos. So just before we go into the labor room, Tina says to the doctor, she says, all right, look, I know about all the various forms of natural childbirth here, okay? But understand this, when I say drugs, I mean now. I don't want any conversation about it. I don't want to discuss it. I don't want to debate it. Just bring the drugs, right? So they induced labor, and anyway, they had to do a C-section because Alexandra was 9'9", and Tina's not that big. And when the anesthesiologist came in, and this wonderful woman bent down and said, "You just felt your last labor bang," Tina kissed her. You know, she was... I being manly and masculine and a tough guy from the streets and have shot it out with the police department and all that good stuff, man. I'm standing in the middle of the labor room crying. There's no thing I can do. I can't help her. I can't stop the pain. I can't deliver the baby. I can't, you know, anything I say to her, she calls me a list of names that's beyond belief. And I just stand in the middle of the labor room and cry. And she's born. And she's given to me to take downstairs to have her footprint and all that done and be weighed and checked out, and because she was so big, to be given some glucose. And I got to sit in a rocking chair with this little girl. Well, actually it was like a little concrete block, which was great. We were both very happy with that. We were both worried about a delicate little infant, you know, because neither one of us are really delicate little people, you know. Tina's very expansive, you know, and as am I at times, most of the time. And so I sat in a rocking chair with this little angel. And much of the fear went away, and much of the anger, tension. I get afraid, I get angry. That's my way of dealing with fear. And so I thought, this is cool. But I'm still really upset over being in Los Alamos. I just can't explain it. You know, I mean, I was very into the Native American culture then. I'm doing sweats every week. I'm spending a lot of time on reservations and the pueblos. And I'm trying to get more city out of me, more street out of me. I want to get more where plants are comfortable, dirt's comfortable, trees is comfortable, bugs are comfortable. I'm tired of being uptight about some of that stuff. So I was just really upset. Well, we find out the very next day, it turns out Alexandra is a very high-need baby. And Tina has to recover from the C-section. And there was only her and one other baby in the entire ward here at the hospital. And there was this one nurse at this hospital who got it that Tina was whacked out from the C-section, that Alexandra was high need. She'd come in every morning. She'd make a sling out of a sheet, put Alexandra in the sling, and carry her with her for her whole shift, even to staff meetings. She'd bring her in to be fed and then put her back in the sling and carry her on. So I'm thinking, well, you know, maybe this was not a bad hospital choice by God, you know, to have this kind of care for her. And then later I'm talking to the Little Birds, a couple of brothers, buddies of mine, and they said, man, you should know your government by now. Los Alamos is the most sacred ground in all of New Mexico.